Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
So for the opening line this morning, I've got pretty much the same line, but I'd like to try out two different inflections and tones with you. You let me know which one works better, okay, please?
All right.
All right. Go ahead, punk. Make my day. Or go ahead, punk. Make my day.
The second one has it all.
And welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. Each week, we two guys, me, Jim, that's Steve, we get together and we talk about records. This goes way back when Steve was local here. He'd come into the record store every Sunday like clockwork and we'd talk about records. But you left me, man. You left me for higher
I know,
climate.
but now it's like a video. So
It is.
for those
It is.
those that couldn't visualize well, we're here for them.
And those that are now visualizing are like, oh God, go back, go
Yeah.
back.
But instead of we're holding up our records like this because no one can see it, so it don't
There we
matter.
go. My name's Jim and I own a record store.
And I'm Steve, a record collector.
It's a match made in wherever, vinyl heaven,
Yes.
I think is what it is. So we've got a fun one today, but holy cow, I'm going to be right up front with you, Steve, on this one. This is a difficult topic today, punk rock. We're going to lean on our favorites, and I do have favorites. I like punk, but I am by far a punk aficionado. I think like you, I know what I like, and I've got what I like, and then I've got a few that you're supposed to have in your collection. But man, this is a tough one because it branches in so many different directions.
It was. It was very. I thought this would be easy. But as you know, I have a large collection. I go, God, what are my favorites? Which ones? There's some which were obvious choices.
Yep.
But as I began looking at this, it's going, wow, there's so much. And I lost so much during that flood, but you had that punk collection that really replenished me. And I have I think a pretty substantial punk collection, but to say what are my favorites? And then I wanted to try to look at because punk's still happening. What's going on with the new music scene? And there's some great punk albums that have came out lately. They're phenomenal. So I was just trying to narrow it down. I don't know how well I did there. But I do have go-tos. Yeah, definitely.
So when we say we're going to try to get to our favorites, this is going to be a toughie.
It is very tough.
What isn't as tough though is Vinyl Community Podcast, where we talk about what we brought into the collection. I had a really light one, but how was your week bringing some goodies in?
I light too. It wasn't that big. I had brought this in. It's Blur. And it is just their self-titled, I guess, Blur. But it's not their first album. That was Parklife. But this has that, what was it? Song. It has Song 2. Woohoo! So the reason I brought this in is I heard a commercial that goes, woohoo! And I go, damn, I like that song. Well, I'll just go buy the album. So I did. So there you go. Because I want to go woohoo! It is a good album. I like Blur. I don't need all of Blur, but Parklife's my favorite. I did like this one a lot. I only had it on CD, so there we go. Woohoo! Then I was surprised I didn't have. I thought I had this on vinyl, but I did not. It's the Dandy Warhols, and this is 13 Tales from Urban Bohemia, and this has one of my all-time favorite songs. It starts off. It's Godless, and Godless it has a fascinating trumpet playing on there that sounds very cool, but it's a little bit haunting, but just has a beautiful sound to it. Really, really liked it. And so it's a 2-album set. It has Bohemian Like You, which was big. Muhammad was big. There was just, there's some very good songs on here. So I was really happy. Just, it's a nice reissue. Then since I bought that, I know you've said this, Jim, a million times. Why don't people redo the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Yeah. Oh my.
Yes. Time again. I mean, why aren't we just doing it? So Yeah, the Dandy Warhols did. And we have the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald done stoner rock style.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a little druggy. It's a little it's a little slower. Uh, Gordon Lightfoot's better. But I just saw that. I love that song so much. You know, well, how much could they really ruin it a lot? I don't think they ruined it, but they did not enhance it either.
There you
So,
go.
Dandy Warhols.
I will look that one up. I've heard a couple of other covers. The name of the group, it's another Canadian or a Canadian group that does a cover that's just rocking. I'll have to look that up. Name escapes me at the moment, but I'll let you know next week
All
for sure
right.
on that because I look for vinyl. I look like you. I look for that on vinyl and didn't
Yeah.
see it.
Yep. The final one, a group called Shellac. I know I had you look for one of their albums. This is not the one that I was having you look at that had come out this year. This was Steve Albini's group. So this is his Peel sessions that he did, and there's some live music in here, pretty good. It was a friend of mine, named Dave, had turned me on to this group, Shellac. He just said that new album is phenomenal, but it's kind of sold out everywhere because Steve died. And so everyone jumped all over this thing, and the prices now run pretty astronomical on the
Wow.
secondary market. So I went to a local record store and I was looking for it. They didn't have it, but this came out a couple years ago, and they did have the album. So kind of definitely more of post-punk. Math rock probably could be thrown in there, maybe a tinge of industrial happening. So something totally different, you know.
You know,
Yes, you know,
you
man.
you mentioned that the punk collection, and I do remember that was that's been what 3 years now, I think, since we brought that into the store. But there was a Shellac album in there. I remember that because it was in the triple digits, but the cover, it was like a special limited run. The cover was actually made of tin or metal
Huh.
and bent around an inner sleeve, a harder cardboard inner sleeve. It was just a super limited, like 100, 200 copies of it.
Wow.
And we did have that. I think that was the one you were looking for, but a little predating your seeking the group out.
Yeah. Final
Very
thing, actually, my daughter-in-law here in town, Kim, bought this at a garage sale. It's the Sesame Street
cool.
box set of 45s. And so when my grandson comes over, we could now play. We got the Hokey Pokey. We got the Walt Disney. We got Sesame Street, different ones in here. So yeah, look at that. 12 Days of Christmas and the Little Drummer Boy. Okay, maybe not yet. Frosty the Snowman and 10 Cookies and Hansel and Gretel. So yeah, I think all those classics that we can do it. You know how they outlawed the book pretty much, Little Black Sample for good reasons. So
Mhm.
we have Little Brave Sambo. It's a little white guy on there, and a Little Brave Sambo. So
There we
there we
go.
have it. We're keeping the book alive. We just have to change things up. But I don't know. That picture looks like that was done like years ago. Jeez, that's old.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
well, this
It's-
this
you know,
was yeah, it
I
was
was going to
fun.
say
So I look.
that's a great collection to get a kid going into vinyl. It's
It
great.
is. This is very nice, and so he comes over because he perks up when he hears music. He just stops, and we're in a store or something. Hears music, he just stops, and then he starts doing the Aiden dance, which is kind of a wild little thing, and uh, yeah, dances like a white guy. But
Bigger question. Have you entered all of those and that cute box set into Discogs yet?
no, but it could be very, very valuable.
It could
Very
be. It's a
valuable.
good garage sale find. Wow.
What about you, Jim? What's your
Well,
pickups?
I feel weird because you said light week and then you go into you go into several. When I say light week, I mean just one.
Oh,
The only pickup I had from this week was a Mojo Nixon and Skid Roper and their Root Hog or Die album.
yeah, I
You
used
know,
to have that.
yep. Mojo passed away. Geez, a couple of months now ago, and I got looking at I've got Bodacious, and I've got a huge Root Hog or Die poster on the wall here at the record store
Yeah.
that I've had since my college radio days. And I got thinking, it's like, I don't have Root Hog or Die. I may have had it at one point in time. So this is the one exception. I went out looking for it on Discogs because it was a hole in the collection I thought I needed to fill. And price wise, it was maybe a little bit up there, somewhere in the $40 to $50 range, which Mojo's Death,
Wow.
I can see that kicking in. And then there was one for 20, and I'm like, but no cutouts or anything, so it's good there. But the description said on Discogs it had a slight dish warp that does not affect it. It had the dreaded DNAP, does not affect play.
Yeah.
On there. So I thought, well, $20 cheaper. How bad could it be? I got it. It was bad. I don't know what kind of turntable the seller was using to test, but it played for me. But I tell you what, it made me nervous to see the needle doing this. So I broke out the record pie. I've got one of those record, the pizza baker things for that. And I baked it and mellowed it a little bit. I baked it a second time, a total of probably 6 hours ish altogether, if not maybe a little bit more in the record flattener. And it's passable now. I mean, it's still got some warble to it. Listened to it yesterday. It's fun stuff. But maybe a couple years packed in the shelf, it'll mellow down even further, and maybe I'll bake it one more time. But yeah, this has got Pirate Radio, This Land Is Your Land, my favorite chicken drop, and you cannot live without saying Debbie Gibson is pregnant with my two-headed love child.
Exactly. Yeah, I bought that when that came out, and it didn't do that well. It used to be super cheap. All this stuff used to be super cheap. Like all these punk albums, you could just find for like nothing.
Oh, I know.
In the
Next to
80s.
nothing, and now they're cranked up there. I should mention too that the recent pickups and some of the punk that we'll talk about today in today's episode. We will create a Spotify playlist so you can listen to sound clips of the stuff that we're yammering on about. Not always can I find the stuff, but I'll do my best to at least get some of that in there. Look for that playlist link in the description on our YouTube channel and in the description on the podcast page or the Spotify page. It'll have that link there. Spotify, anyway, you think they could ingrain it or at least let us play inside of it. But yeah, this is on YouTube also. We don't want to anger the YouTube copyright gods in this case. Exactly. So yeah, look for that playlist. Usually goes up when the podcast goes up. Depends on how busy I am. Sometimes it's the day after. So do you feel lucky, Punk? Or make my day, Punk? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we're going to do that. Talk about today, and let's start this off, Steve. I hate to do this as a record store owner. I'm supposed to know everything. And I do know punk, but not tremendously. So I went to Wikipedia and said, okay, give me the definition of punk. And it, again, comes from 60s and 70s. And garage rock, I didn't realize this, but they actually began calling garage rock in the late 60s punk rock because it didn't fit the mold with a lot of the other stuff. But then punk came around in the mid 70s and kind of co-opted that. And we'll get into some of the Michigans. I've got the staples when it comes to punk collections. I've got the stuff you're supposed to have. And then a few things that I like is in general. But I think where my collection stands out a little bit is the fact that I can delve into some Michigan punk a little bit deeper, including some of that proto-punk or garage rock punk that helped launch. And Michigan and Detroit in particular is mentioned on the Wikipedia page for punk rock, which I thought is kind of neat. But where do we start? How do we start off this discussion? I'm wearing my Dead Milkmen. You've got a Sex Pistol shirt. I think that says a lot about our differing tastes in punk rock. And I'll even go to bat for the Milkmen and say, I'm not certain whether or not they're true punk. I mean, they are, but maybe. I've got a new term we'll try to invent here.
Yeah, there we go. I mean, because there is so many genres. I mean, I guess that's with any musical thing, but can I run through my genre list here? I had to write these down because there's no way. So for those of you, if you want to write this down, and if you're collecting punk, you got post-punk, hardcore, oi, queercore, riot girl, art punk, horror punk, pop punk, glam punk, skate punk, Christian punk, anarchist punk, garage punk, death rock. They consider that part of it. They could have put punk on it. Don't forget Nazi punk, Celtic punk, Chicano punk, cow punk, folk punk, and punk blues.
Punk blues. Okay, there's a new one.
Yeah.
I've not heard. Okay.
So that takes care of it. There we go. So that's the genre. That's how much it's split up. But let's just face some group comes in and I'm a punk band, but I want to put a country tinge to it. Well, now we got to change that genre up a little bit. So
Yep.
yeah.
Now I mentioned the Wikipedia page on punk, very specifically citing the Detroit acid rock scene in the late '60s and into the early '70s as really the precursor to the punk movement. It's you call it proto punk sometimes. You can't escape the fact that you've got things like Iggy and the Stooges or the MC5. Now, MC5 in particular, you can listen to that and say, okay, that's I've always been a proponent that Michigan music, Detroit, Southern Michigan music in particular, has a distinctive sound, whether it's garage, whether it's hard rock, acid rock, punk, or maybe alternative even too. It all has this differing type of sound that you can't quite put your finger on. It's not quite this and it's not quite that. And I think each of these, as the precursor to punk movement, fits that bill very correctly. I mean, would you consider either of these a punk rock album in that definition?
I guess in that definition, as I was looking, as obviously I have all that, and and I said, well, for me, the punk begins around 75, and I
Yep.
was just trying to say, here's where I'm will be my starting line on it. You know, uh, there is definitely they were revolting against what the music was going on right now. They're just saying, you know what, enough of some of this, which is what punk's all about. It is looking at, especially the long solos, the prog rock. Oh my God, prog
Yep.
rock! What the heck? Kill Pink Floyd if we can. And so when 75 came, that was really what it was all about. That stuff really wasn't happening as much there, but their sound is so unique and it's not garage rock.
Yep.
So it is. It's a little faster. What makes it a little different is some of those songs are longer. Maybe not the MC5, but Stooges could go on for a while in some of their songs, which very anti-punk.
Yeah, and the idea too that punk rock really came about as an anti-establishment movement,
Yeah.
anti-corporatism, anti-record companies, if you will. Many of the punk labels were indie labels that formed around bands or promoters themselves because no one else would pick them up and run with them because of the corporate nature of the rest of the music scene and the anti-corporate, anti-establishment nature of the music that was developing in London, Great Britain, and New York in particular.
Yeah, well, yeah, they were suddenly rock music's James Taylor, rock music Seals and Crofts, and what? No, we don't think this is it. What happened to rockabilly? What happened to garage? But things had changed, and also against the hippie movement. You
Yep.
know, though some of them, Iggy was pretty much you think, well, he's kind of a hippie, isn't he? I don't know, but yeah, it
Iggy
was
is Iggy. Let's just leave it right there. Iggy Pop is defies
whatever.
explanation to this day.
Yes. So yeah, it's the morphing, and those are great albums, and really I was thinking about that. I kind of started um it with television and Marquee Moon. Now this key television really was the first group to hit into CBGBs. I
Yep.
mean, CBGBs was trying to do country and that. And so Tom Verlaine goes in there and says, can we play? And he goes, well, what kind of music? and he, Billy, Chris, he didn't quite get what they were doing, but he goes, okay, fine. You want to play. But their playing inspired, Patti Smith,
Yep.
inspired Ramones. It
Ramones.
began to get everyone else thinking. And also, when they started, the bassist there was this guy, Richard Hell. And this
Mhm.
is a favorite punk album. This guy kind of got things going. Malcolm McLaren was in New York because he was trying to make the New York Dolls into something and was a complete failure. He went the Nazi punk route. So, but he was playing Richard Hell, and he was in television, and he was making his own outfits with ripped T-shirts, safety pins. He had the punk look. I just read a great biography on this guy, and so he got kicked out of television because he liked to get in front and kind of jump around and show more, doing more of the punk thing, while television was trying to be more relaxed up there. Not Richard Hell. So he left, joined the Heartbreakers, again from the New York Dolls there, Johnny Thunders. And then, of course, he put this album out, which is just a great album. It has Love Come in Spurts on there, which is fantastic, and Blank Generation, which really was about what was happening. We are the blank generation. But, I was precursor to Malcolm McLaren. Heard this and goes back and says, we need to do something. He started the sex shop copying these types of clothes.
There we go. And you mentioned the Ramones, picking up and became staples at CBGB's as well. Always like the Ramones. Very quick albums, though. And that's why I think we had our discussion years ago about greatest hits albums. Mania does it for me with the Ramones. And maybe that makes me a little stale on that. Oh, Jim, you should have this. And yes, I should. But when it comes to the Ramones, the albums they're great, but man, they're over. And this has got everything you'd want from the Ramones. Nice little copy on Mania. Yeah. And they're punk. And they've in different incarnations of the Ramones have been around forever and a half.
Well, and the thing, the Ramones showed that you really don't need to know how to play your instruments. You just get up there, let's figure this thing out, go fast. The faster you go, if you make a mistake, no one's going to notice, but you're just blasting through this whole thing, and make it loud, and away you go. And it really got, the do-it-yourself movement happening. Now, I have probably the first 5 Ramones. Mm-hmm. It's not a favorite because they were maybe a little too lighthearted, shall we say, where I liked my punk angry. Yep. And it kind of pissed off. So these
now, guys. Let's see, what pressing is that? I've got the
This is a Japanese. This is a first
very
Japanese.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. That's the other side of the punk movement that we can get into, because concurrent to New York and CBGB's and the Ramones and television and the Voivods and everybody, you've got what's happening in the UK with the likes of the Sex Pistols and the Clash.
Yeah, and they, but New York had definitely problems, and that's why you had a lot of Richard Hell, going against what was happening in New York. UK was in a real bad place right now. The unemployment was high. All these kids, they couldn't get jobs or anything. So someone like the Sex Pistols come out and start talking about all these problems, all these issues. They got people excited. And then, of course, they went out and began doing crazy things. As Malcolm McLaren said, bad press is great press. So let's just go out there and create havoc. And they did, and got banned from a lot of places. But this is one of my easily a top 5 album of all time for me. It still sounds fresh to me. Every song on here I absolutely love. It's, for me, it's a perfect album. They're one and done. I know they had some other stuff, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and I know your thoughts on a lot of the stuff that Sid would attempt his hand at singing. I also just read a news item just this past week that the Sex Pistols, and I'll use the term loosely because what's really left other than Jones, and they're getting ready to do a benefit show, but without Johnny Rotten, without John Lydon. And he's been kind of a very outspoken individual over the past couple of years. 2021 and 20 broke a lot of people, and he's again, he I think has remained anti-establishment, and that is not going good with what most music has become now. And so as part of that, I guess John Lydon has not been invited to partake in the Sex Pistols reunion for this upcoming couple of shows.
Kind of worthless.
Yeah, it's because he was only the vocalist on a lot of stuff after Sid, but come on.
Yeah, he had the energy of those vocals. So and maybe he can't scream them out like he used to, but that thing's pure power.
It is. Now the other group I mentioned in the UK at the time, this one is a tough one for me, is the Clash, and I'm just going to dip to. I've got a music on vinyl triple LP Clash. that's a great, it hits back. It's got all of their stuff, but the Clash has been one of those bands that they're punk, okay, but then maybe are they ska? But then all of a sudden, are they more mainstream? And they experimented with a lot of different stuff to their benefit, obviously. With the, they showed that they can grow and move and change. But especially in something like a greatest hits, you can almost see that changing with
Yeah.
the progression of their music. It's like, this is really hardcore anti-establishment punk, and then all of a sudden you've got, Safe European Home or London Calling, Guns of Brixton. And maybe I'm being too hard on the Clash, but then you get stuff along the lines of Train in Vain, which is almost a staple now for classic rock radio.
Well, it really, it shows to me, it shows the evolution. You think
Yeah.
75 to 77, I mean, punk came and went. And it burned out because the groups began to expand, like the Clash began to expand. Definitely reggae was huge in the UK. So, and it was important to these people. Well, how do we add this into part of our scene? And a lot of the producers did reggae. So it was just this evolution, and it just it was like the Sex Pistols. It came, it went. It fast and burned out. But then it kept evolving again, as any musical genre will.
A quote comes to mind on that. I'm trying to think who said that it's better to burn out than fade away.
Yes.
About
Yes.
Johnny Rotten, Neil Young.
Yep,
I know he said that.
exactly.
So.
I had this one here, and Stiff Little Fingers
Oh
and
yeah,
Flammable Material. A friend gave me, turned me on to this back in the 80s. I mean, I missed the punk when it came out. It wasn't part of what I was listening to in college in Nebraska, but I remember I was in my dorm, and there was these guys on the other end of the hallway. They were big into Elton John, and they had all these 45s, and they go, "Come over, you got to listen to this thing. This is awful." And they put on a 45 of "God Save the Queen." Now, again, big Elton John fans, and they go, why would this, what is this about? It didn't really bother me, but didn't really register as I got to run out and get this. Well, a friend of mine who was a punker in the early 80s, we were working together, turned me on to punk. This was one of the albums he brought over. He brought me over 5 albums. There was a Clash, there was the Sex Pistols, there was this, there was the Cramps, and one other one. And this thing blows me away to this day. It's just one that I will grab. Stiff Little Fingers went more into pub rock, hard rock, which you had to keep changing. But their first 3 albums were fast and furious, and this thing again is one of those perfect albums for me. Suspect Device is on here. Alternative Ulster. You don't have a punk compilation without Stiff Little Fingers. They just rule. And it sounds like the guy swallowed razor blades. His voice is so rough and gravelly, which makes it exciting. But they're angry, they're mad, and it comes out in their music. And so, I love the energy.
Now let's move to the other coast here in the U.S., because that is not without its level of importance or influence on the further development of punk music. We're talking about some of the biggers coming out of Southern California and LA, and you get a group like the Dead Kennedys, Jello Biafra's band kicking in here with some of theirs. I know you're a fan. You've got a few OGs. I think this pretty much does it for me because of there was a couple of big songs on it. Stars and Stripes with Corruption. Great tune off of this. Yep. And I see you got a nifty card in there too. Where'd you pick that one up?
I wonder where I bought this at. Oh, it's an original with the red label from Radio Wasteland.
There we go. But yeah, this is, I think I've got a little merch flyer back there. This one, by the way, for those who are curious about some of the Dead Kennedy stuff, it does get very collectible. Somehow I got one that still has the Alternative Tentacles hype sticker. And more importantly for this particular album, and we won't get into it, but it's got the poster.
Yep.
So look that one up because I don't want to show it.
I'd looked long and hard to be able to get that one back in. I probably got it from you. And because I bought that. That was my first Dead Kennedys album that I ever bought. But this is my go-to from there. It's their first album. Kid, they're angry. But
yes.
Their lyrics can have some humor in it, like was it Hang the Landlord? kill the poor, which is, it's not about killing. They're just, rich people. That's their thoughts. They're going into California, uber alles. I kill children. Holiday in Cambodia, very much anti-establishment.
Yeah. And
Just,
Biafra as just an individual was that way too. I mean, he
mhm,
after the Dead Kennedys and between some of his solo stuff, he would go out and do actual speaking engagements. He was on the college lecture tour in the mid 80s to late 80s,
yeah,
talking about stuff. We mentioned Mojo Nixon earlier. There's even a Jello Biafra Mojo Nixon album out there called Prairie Home Invasion. I used to own that, and I don't, and I kind of wish I'd kept it because there's some cool stuff on there. It's just this really weird mix of Jello Biafra's vocal stylings with Mojo Nixon's countrified alternative punk behind it,
sure.
and Mojo howling once in a while.
When you said, Southern California, which was known for hardcore, I
Yep.
mean, you just think of Agent Orange was out there, Flesh Eaters. There's a lot of great stuff. One of my favorites there that, again, it was a must-have was Flipper and Generic here, the Generic album. And of course, this has Sex Bomb Baby on here, but it's wonderful punk music, not as angry as like a Black Flag or something like
No.
that. They're a little more relaxed, but still great stuff. And one of those that I had to bring back into my collection. It was such a high. All these that I'm showing were high on my list of what I needed to have back in again because they were that important of an album to me. And just another great example of California punk.
I've got a couple of go-tos from that era as well, and one that they're not heavy rotation listeners, but when I found this come through, I was very happy because I played this on the radio in the 80s a lot, a bunch of stuff that we could, and that's Fear. Fear's got out the album, another great one. I don't have that, but I found a copy of More Beer. Just some, again, very tongue-in-cheek, very somewhat violent type of strangulation. I'm a doctor. Bomb the Russians, always a good one, and timely again, apparently. But one of the other ones, and this was always a big favorite going through, was The Descendants. And I know you recently found a good OG copy of Milo Goes to College, which it's up behind you. Envy you for that. That's a good get. This is a reissue, but this has always been fun stuff. But man, they go by so quickly, and it's you justifying spending 50, 60, $70 for an album that's like maybe 28 minutes long.
Yeah.
But this is an OG, and this actually I have enjoyed all a little bit more than Milo or some of the other Descendant stuff on here. This has got some more pop friendly type punk songs, but I'd still consider them to be punk. Clean Sheets or Van or Coolidge and All. K-Mage, those were ones that were we were able to play on the radio more or less in some spots, but I think good stuff all around, but still had that punk attitude, I think. And is that a good way to put it with the Descendants?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
they called them All for a while. This is a Descendants album. I can't get on board with them calling themselves All.
From the mid 80s, out of Minneapolis, the Replacements.
Yep.
Now they also changed into more melodic, more song structure. But this one here, sorry, Ma, I forgot to take out the trash. This is pure punk happening. Now, how well are they playing? It's pretty sloppy. Some of them were drunk most of the time. But Johnny's Going to Die's on here. More Cigarettes, Taking a Ride, which is a wonderful song. I Hate Music. It's just shut up. It's just wonderful. They have Something to Do, DU, Uskadoo at them. And it's just, this is a wonderful one. There we go. To me, this is their punkiest album that they have. They just rip it up.
It is fun too, and that segues nicely into Husker Du, because I've got a question mark on Bob Mould and company.
Yeah.
Bob Mould went on to a fantastic solo career. Mostly, I would call it alternative, not quite jangle, but heavy guitar, as was his style. Do you put Husker Du into the punk category, or is that something that defies it for you?
I was thinking college rock. I mean, college
Okay.
rock began to absorb a whole bunch of stuff on there. There's definitely a lot of punk elements within, especially early Uskadoo.
Yep.
You think of the noise rock that was happening, the hardcore. I mean, early Uskadoo is hardcore punk.
Yep.
Absolutely. As I think as again, they morph, they change what you got to do if you want to keep it fresh. Unless you're AC/DC, you can do the same thing every time.
You can get away with it for
Yeah,
50 years.
exactly. That's what they want. That's what you get. Uh, but these other bands, especially because Bob Mould became a better writer,
Yep.
Grant Hart became a better writer until they were competing with each other to see who could get the most songs on an album. But it really, to me, then it changed into the college rock, the alternative rock. I
Yep.
think began coming up.
College radio music, which we educated folks on. Same thing kind of falls on the Damned. It's the same thing for me with Husker Du. It's the idea that this is hard and fast, and then yep, there we go. And as it goes a little bit further, maybe they're leaning toward that college radio side, college
They
rock.
were. I think the Damned really got more into hard rock. Their first album obviously had the very first punk single out of the UK, New Rose, came out, and so they were the first one to get something out on vinyl. They beat everybody. This one here had Neat and New Rose, but it's just pure punk fun. Of course, I have all these albums from because they were from my original collection because these were important to me. They're all important and they were original pressings. So, hey, well, I'm not tossing those out. But yeah, then they became, this one here was pretty punky, but they began kind of get more goth going on.
Yeah, there we go.
And
That's the word I was looking
pub
for.
rock again, because again,
Yep.
we're changing because the punk scene was burning out and people were moving into new things.
Speaking of new things, let's switch the gears to, I don't know if we mentioned the Dead Milkmen, and I'll go there with the Milkmen on this. From Philadelphia, these guys are a punk rock band, still active today. They put out an album last year. Their classic stuff is obviously the best. I really, really dig that. But I don't know as if I'd consider them punk in that sense of the word. They were almost comedic in their writing and their performance.
Yeah.
Fun, and let's coin the new genre, fun punk. Or can we use funk, or is that already taken?
No, I didn't use that one yet. Yeah, funk punk.
Funk? No, I think funk is taken, but fun punk. I think that encapsulates what the Milkmen are, what they were in this. Big Lizard in My Backyard, very quick songs.
Yes.
By today's standards, tremendously politically incorrect with some of these older ones as well, but just fun. Bitchin' Camaro, which was on Big Lizard, was an absolute staple in college radio in my era in the mid 80s. You couldn't get through a shift on the air without playing that, at least once to through there. And I'll show off the Milkmen collection. I do have them. We've got the Eat Your Paisley through a point. And you mentioned punk being really not so much the anti-establishment, but against the hippies. On Eat Your Paisley, they've actually got a song that says, "The thing that only eats hippies." It's about a monster who chews on Crosby, Stills, and Nash, but spit them out.
They're punk.
I have Bucky Fellini, same thing, some great stuff from them. But then we get to, my favorite out of them all is Beelzebubba. And I do have, I think I showed this off before, but being the college radio guy that I was, I saved all the promotional material that they sent. So I still have my original Punk Rock Girl cutout that they sent along with the promo package, and some cool stuff in there. And I used to get the Dead Milkmen newsletter and the letter that goes with this. But, this one has got, of course, Punk Rock Girl on it, which was another one of their just huge hits. And that I started to drift away after that one. I did pick up Metaphysical Graffiti, and I do have the RSD version of Metaphysical Graffiti because it's a fun one. That's the original Methodist coloring book that they sent along as a promotional.
Oh, neat.
Lost its punch for me when they reissued the coloring book with that RSD release a few years, about a year ago.
Yeah.
I took away that, I had that because it was a promotional only gimmick they sent to radio. So the Milkmen, for me, they're fun, but I don't know as if I'd classify them absolutists of punk rock. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and feel free to correct me in the comments, dear listeners.
Yeah, there we go. I always thought them as more punk just because the songs were quick, fast, and to the point. You can have fun. You can be a fun punk. It's
Yep.
okay. It's okay.
That's well, here, let me toss this one out here too. Did I just lose it? I think I lost it. This was kind of the grail that we both ended up with, I remember. And the Minutemen, double nickels on the dime. Mike Watt driving down the I-10 in California. We probably could have put that in there, but I don't know as if this is straight up punk either. It is by strictest definition, but it falls into that. We're just kind of having fun, whatever.
It is, and they have some serious. You get 500 songs on a 2-album set, which is pretty amazing.
The shortest being about 45 seconds.
Yeah, I think that's it's 80s punk because punk again kept changing, and here how about 1990s punk?
There we go.
Right there, Green Day and Rancid. Punk was making a comeback again, and again, people say, "Well, that's pop punk." Well, it was punk music, and Green Day, they again, like many of these groups, they changed. Rancid, I don't think changed as much as Green Day did, but two, iconic albums from the '90s that fall within the punk genre, and you can say, well, it's poser punk or whatever, but Green Day were true punkers. They were. It's just this album blew them up, so true punkers say, well, now because what's part of being punk? Anti-establishment. Well, you have a major record label. You can't be punk, which is BS. But in Rancid, again, they blew up on this one, but they kept their punk cred. So
when that Green Day album came out, I remember, I was still kind of doing the DJ thing, and I was like, that's not punk. These guys, basically, they're copying the Dickies at this point, right down to a couple of song titles. But more recently, with Green Day becoming as successful as they have, and I'm not endorsing this as a term referring to Green Day. I'm saying this is what I read, and I chuckled. I heard Green Day referred to as the Muppet Babies of punk rock. So, again, it's up to you to follow it. But I thought, okay, that's amusing. I'll go with that.
Yeah. On the newer vein, this just came out a couple years ago. We have Viagra Boys. And the Viagra Boys definitely have the whole punk thing going on. Fast, loud. Some of it's pretty darn funny. Others a little more serious. A lot of power in this album. I mean, they just come out and they just rip it up. Great stuff. Easy, I think, still to find. This came out in 2022. Part of the punk. We also had, I think, out of California, Off. And this one, another one from 2022. Phenomenal punk album. Again, fast, furious, trying to say something, slice up the pie, time will come, war above Los Angeles, invisible empire. And it's there's a lot of songs on each side. So classic punk where they're short, but they're there, but we have something to say, and we're really angry about it. And away they go. And then out of Australia, Emil and the Sniffers. And at this, her voice is great. And you think, there's some great women punk rockers, and sadly, I don't have a lot of them. But she is pretty amazing and just takes off. And what was this one? This one came out this one might have been 2023, could have been 2022 again. But if you've never heard her, she's ferocious. I mean, I think she would scare me. So quite honestly, she just comes out and rips it up, and just phenomenal punk music out of Australia. And so there's a lot of good stuff coming. It's just, I love this, this time period, but I keep trying to find some of the new stuff. It's just be able to find it. I guess it's easy if you really want to research, but I'm a lazy.
And I applaud you for keeping up on that, because like I said, mine has kind of fallen by the wayside once I get past the ones that everybody should have in their collection, the staples, but I enjoy them as well. I don't have it out here, but I do have the latest Dead Milkman that came out last year, and I think a 12-inch that came out the year before. And it's like, it's okay. To me, it just wasn't the same, because it felt like they were just still hanging on to that, but they were trying to be a little bit more politically correct with what they're doing, which
Yeah.
kind of ruins the shtick of what the Dead Milkmen were in the
Yeah.
80s. So,
Well, yeah, like Bad Religion's also been
yep.
considered.
Oh, yeah.
They keep going, and they've tried to keep their aesthetic there. Quite often, though, a lot of the punk bands, I mean, they get old and it just doesn't have that same power. It's like,
Nope.
well, okay, but uh, don't you make a lot of money now doing
You
it?
do. And to be honest, times change as well. I mean, the
Yeah,
things that were staples, especially I'll lean on the Milkmen again, or even Jello Biafra, the kind of things that you could sing about or make fun of in the 80s, you can't even approach
yeah.
doing nowadays.
And those problems are different. Look at the
Yeah.
Sex Pistols. What was happening in the UK? A lot of that, was fixed and all that. There's always problems. If you want to find it, I mean, you could do homelessness in the U.S. I mean, come to Denver, and you can see. I mean, it's terrible, and that is something again a punk band can take and run with. But yeah, things do change, and I think as people get older, well, we for the most part, except for Jello Biafra, we mellow out.
For the most part. As we wrap up today, if we have a couple of moments, I want to run through some, that, and dear listeners, hopefully you guys know too by now, that I've got a soft spot for Michigan music. I really have been trying to concentrate a lot of collection on that. And as such, there is a lot of just true underground punk music that has come through in the Michigan stuff. Some I like, some I am okay with, some I really like. But I'm going to go all the way back now. But by all the way back, I mean to 2009, but into the early 70s for a band for Death. Not the metal band Death, but the Detroit punk band Death, and their album For the Whole World to See. Now, this album grew out of the popularity of the documentary, a band called Death, which was done in the Hackney Brothers in the early 70s, attempting to get a recording contract, but because they were African American, they were saying, they were told, why aren't you guys singing Motown? Why aren't you guys doing funk or something like that? And they're like, because we're a punk band. And this is such, but again, I'm not going to say this is straight up punk, because this is almost the precursor to Iggy Pop, or around the same time developing. It's got that Michigan sound to it. But Keep on Knocking, Freaking Out, and Politicians in My Eyes, great punk tunes by a great punk band. And if you have not seen the documentary, a band called Death, I strongly encourage you to seek that out. Look for it streaming.
Yeah.
Another fun one. This is kind of a rarity, and most of these end up in the triple digits. This is a group called Cyanide, and I Left My Heart in Detroit City, and I hopefully should be able to find a sound clip of this one. But this is just some very cool, again, topical. Detroit's got its problems. Early 80s punk. 1982 is when this one came out. Have you ever heard of this one at all, Steve? Or seen it?
I've heard the group, but I
Okay.
don't know anything of them. And yeah, that'd be something that I would grab.
Fun. It's really, really cool. I'm glad that came out of the punk collection, by the way. It found its way into mine here. Still active, sort of, is Tesco V and the Meatmen. Tesco's down in the Lansing, Michigan area now, after going out to New York. But the Meatmen, just some very irreverent 80s punk as well. I actually have an autographed copy of We're the Meatmen and You Suck from Tesco V on the front there, and we call that up there because that's kind of cool. We like to show that stuff off once in a while, right?
Exactly.
I had a friend pick that up for me on that from Tesco V. But this is going to be, I think, along the lines, a cross between the Dead Milkmen and the Dead Kennedys. How about that?
Okay.
And Tesco V actually was one of the co-founders of Touch and Go Records.
Oh.
As well, which put out a lot of great stuff. Butthole Surfers, which again, more college radio rock stylings on that. Other Detroit stuff, and this is going to venture into the rockabilly side of things. I know you picked up a copy of Country Bob and the Blood Farm because I was there and talked you into it. I hope you're not regretting that situation. You haven't unfriended me yet, so I think we're okay. But just this is psychobilly punk, but from Detroit, tremendously irreverent, as is the band Snake Out. I remember these guys. We played them on the air when I was in college radio all this time too, but same stuff, tremendously inappropriate by today's standards. I think they're still going. Speaking of absolutely inappropriate Michigan punk, Elvis Hitler.
Uh,
If you've heard of these guys, I won't even
yeah.
talk about some of their stuff, but this really reminds me of the Cramps. All of these have that Cramps feel to them, and again, the Cramps aren't really going to be so much of a punk band as a psychobilly or psychopunk. Is that what you would call them? Okay, or
Yeah, I guess the Cramps were hard. It's like, God, I mean, their aesthetic is so punk, but yet it's different.
and if you can find them, just some great compilations from Michigan punk. It came from the garage. It came from the garage too. It's got the aforementioned Snake Out, Elvis Hitler on these. Bands that probably have come and gone. 3D Invisibles are on here, another psychobilly act. Spanking Bozo, lots of the Gories, another great Detroit punk band. I didn't even get into talking about the Dirt Bombs. I've got a couple of Dirt Bombs albums. I didn't pull them out, but they're another Detroit garage act that kind of borders on punk depending upon the album that you're looking to and going to. Some of that's fun. Then this one popped up a while ago. These guys are probably past their teens now. This was from 2007. And this is a group called the Muldoons. These are a couple of younger kid brothers in 2007 playing punk rock in Michigan. I actually think I put some of the tunes from this on our YouTube channel so folks could hear that. But yeah, this was a very cool. The father of these guys had some ties to Jack White early on, also.
Okay.
In the Detroit area. So, and then finally, this is a Celtic one. This is just purely mid-Michigan stuff. If folks are ever on the lookout for some great Celtic punk from Saginaw and Bay City area in Michigan, it's the Toss Pints, and these guys are really the epitome of that Celtic punk sound.
Oh, neat.
Bar punk. How's
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So that is kind of the all-encapsulating overview of our favorite punk. I don't want to say it's essential. Some of it is, some of it's not. But it's so tough to nail down. And that's, I think, was the difficult portion, as we mentioned when we started out today, Steve, that to try to say that we're going to talk strictly about punk is really kind of it's a tough one to get into, because especially with all the Michigan stuff, it branches out into so many different directions.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's like any, I guess you could say, any genre, except maybe yacht rock. It spreads out to a lot of different directions and going in. Yeah, it's like, well, is it true punk? Is it not true punk? Yeah, it's up to you. It's if you like it, hey, it's punk.
I fall on, I guess if I have to say favorite, I'm gonna stick with the Dead Milkmen and that kind of irreverent fun punk side, but the earlier Dead Milkmen stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you sit? You sit
I'm
in the harder edged?
Yeah, yeah, it's not the hardcore, but again, Sex Pistols is a perfect album. Stiff Little Fingers, perfect album to me. That is my sweet spot when it comes
Very
to
cool.
punk. But I keep looking and trying to find new, because there is a lot of excitement going on out there. It's just you got to find it.
I'm gonna quote a Tubes song, or at least the I was a punk before you were a punk, because the Tubes certainly not known as being a punk act, because they had some chops if they wanted to kick into it. And that the live album we talked about a while ago has that line in there where he's just, the whole song is about, I was the punk, you're not a punk.
Uh,
I think that really sums that up. So, what are some of your favorite punk albums? And does that fit into a specific subgenre of punk? We would love to hear from you folks. Set us straight on a few of these too. Are Green Day really the Muppet Babies of punk rock, or am I going to be saying something controversial by quoting that? But head over to our Facebook page, head over to the YouTube channel. Let us know where we're wrong. Let us know what you think on some of this stuff. So on that note, Steve, I think we will kind of wrap up for the week. You gonna go punk out in the pool here?
I think we're going to head out to Boulder, Colorado. Father's Day.
Cool.
There's a record store and an art museum I can check out. So, yeah, that's what we're
Very cool. Well, you check out the record store. The family will check out the art museum, right? Now, I know you like the art stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. It's my day. I get to do what I want.
Well, as always, thank you folks for watching and listening to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast brought to you each week by, well, us two guys. Maybe we'll work on that corporate sponsorship, but we're too anti-establishment.
Here we go.
All right. Have a great week, Steve, and we'll talk to you all next time.
Bye, everyone.